All right, welcome to the Tech Transfer Podcast. I'm Dave Brown. I'm here with Aaron Airmet, who is a senior product manager at Bayesian and also has run a product management podcast, which we'd like to talk about, and a Lord of the Rings podcast. So there's a new Lord of the Rings movie coming out, I think December 14th. It's animated. What's that all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So that movie is called The War of the Rohirrim. It takes place in the third age of Middle-earth, and it follows the namesake adventure of Helm Hammerhand. You might be familiar with Helm's Deep, that place where Aragorn had that great battle in the Two Towers movie film. So that's an exploration of that, and that's coming out soon. So looking forward to that.
Okay, well, great. And it's not by Peter Jackson, but it's, I think, written by someone who co-wrote the Lord of the Rings movies, right?
Yeah, they definitely have some connections with Peter Jackson, but Peter Jackson was not directly involved, but there's some connections there. And I'm not totally up on those details, but there is some connection.
Okay. I saw all the other ones. I'll probably see this. But in addition to Lord of the Rings podcast, you've also done a project management podcast. So what is product management and how do you get involved in that?
Yeah, excellent question. Product management. If you were to ask 5 product managers, what is product management, you'd probably get 7 or 8 different answers from just 5 product managers. To me, product management it's the art and science of solving real actual problems for customers in a way that aligns to a business strategy and provides value to the business, and usually comes out with some sort of product. That could be software, that could be a physical product, it could be some sort of a service. But really, it is just the art and science of solving customer problems in a way that is strategic and valuable for a business.
Okay, and so we'll license BYU technologies to a company, and then a little ways down the road, they're going to have a product manager working on it. What would that person do? You have a product. What's a typical project you would do?
Yeah, well, a lot of that depends on the organization of the company. If it's a startup, if it's a Fortune 500 large scale company, what kind of funding that they have, what kind of customers are they serving. But day to day, a product manager of something like that might be they are talking with a lot of customers. They're doing a lot of that research and discovery with customers. They're figuring out what pain points are, what their problems are, and what customers are trying to achieve, the desired progress they're trying to make in a given set of circumstances. They're listening and they're learning all of that. They're gathering that input directly from customers, maybe from sales, maybe from customer success, from a lot of different places. And then they're also looking at what is the future business of the strategy? What are we trying to get to? Are we going for a revenue goal? Are we going for a growth goal? Are we going to be financing in the next 6 to 12 months or something? And looking at all of those different business objectives. And really the perfect pairing is where those customer needs and the business needs blend together. And that's really where the product manager really shines, is coming together and saying, okay, we have user needs, we have business needs, we come together, we can solve those in some really specific ways with our products here.
Okay, so it sounds like a bit of strategy, a bit data analytics, maybe some customer relations. What's the ideal background? Are you a tech person going into product management, or is it more of a business thing?
Yeah, excellent question. So product managers can come from all walks of life. I actually was an English major at BYU. Surprise, surprise, Lord of the Rings podcast.
Oh, yeah, right.
But I also have a lot of entrepreneurial drive within me just to solve problems and talk with people. So I definitely come from product management. I've definitely come to product management from more of a business perspective, but also just kind of a psychological, let's understand humans and how they tick and how they operate and how they interact with software, how they interact with the world, and help them to solve problems in their life. I know product managers who were software engineers for several years, and now they're coming over on more of the business side. I've known product managers who know UX really well, user experience design, and now they're on the product side. But really, in the traditional format, a product manager is usually tied up with 2 great individuals, a UX designer and an engineering manager or a technical lead of some sort. And in that trifecta, or that 3-person pairing, you as a product manager, your main role is to be the voice of the business and the voice of the customer, and to really prioritize and help the team decide what is the most important thing that we could be working on and building right now.
Okay, great. So if you were to go back, though, would you do English major again, or what is kind of a standard? What would be the perfect course of study for someone who wants to be a product manager?
Yeah, I actually do recommend studying in the humanities for a little bit. I feel like as an English major, I can write and I can communicate and I can storytell really well. I can understand people really well. I think those are great skills that set me apart as a product manager. If I could go back to my younger self and sort of grab myself by the collar and say, wake up, I'd say go over to that business school and start taking some business classes, whatever they might be, probably more business strategy type classes. When I was an undergrad, I had no idea that the business school actually had undergrad programs. I thought they only had MBAs, you had to be a grad student. So I just didn't know And so if I could go back in time to my undergrad self and say, yeah, go walk over to that business school, start taking some business strategy courses. But I think I would definitely want to complement that with something from the humanities side, because I think that's just it's such a unique skill set and perspective that a lot of product managers just don't have.
Yeah, actually, I saw some stats on campus from the College of Humanities. A huge portion, maybe it's 25 or 30% of students, end up being essentially business consultants of some type, probably a lot in product management, actually. So, yeah.
Well, before I don't want to move off from this point without telling you about a little company called Apple, and maybe you know their one of their big CEOs was Steve Jobs. The whole inspiration behind Apple was Steve Jobs didn't know what to do. He wandered into a calligraphy class, an art class, something in the humanities. And he saw calligraphy, he saw typesetting, he saw it opened up this whole new world of beauty and aesthetics and design to him. And that was the impetus behind all of the design decisions behind Apple. And that's kind of what made Apple the company today. So would Steve have had that perspective if he was sitting in business classes all day long? Probably not. So I think there's really there's great value in bridging both humanities and business together and having that unique perspective.
And there's also value in just looking different than other people in a role, like having a different mix of experience. And so in tech transfer, you see that people usually have a couple different backgrounds going on. And we've had some people out of humanities working in software technologies and AI. You work in AI now, so at Vasion, I don't know a lot about them. What is your role there, and what do they do?
Yeah, absolutely. So Vasion is growing out of the printer space. So if you think of large organizations that have a lot of printers like BYU, there is some IT person somewhere whose job is to maintain all of the printers all around campus, and that job is very difficult for that person to do.
Yeah.
So Vasion really got their start in helping the IT professional manage their print servers across large campuses, large organizations, things like that. And since then, they've started to move into some adjacent businesses like business process automation, document automation, output automation, different things like there. So you notice I'm using a similar word there, automation, right? So we're starting to look across all organizations, various industries, and thinking, how do we help these companies to better automate their processes and drive better efficiencies and better outcomes, better solutions through automation. And a key component of that is using AI to do a lot of different things. Some of the things that we've been experimenting with is what we would call natural language processing, which involves an AI looking at language and either generating new language, that would be natural language generation, where it's generating new things, Gen AI. Many of your listeners are probably familiar with something like ChatGPT, where you can put in a prompt and it will generate some content for you. That is a natural language processing function. We're looking at some summary type of things as well. Sentiment analysis, where you can do a global search across a lot of different documents, a lot of different data, and start to get some of that sentiment analysis, better search results as well. And eventually we're going to move into the mode of what we're calling autonomous automation, where we will have an AI system that is constantly monitoring and looking at the different processes within an organization and adaptively learning to that organization and recognizing where inefficiencies and bottlenecks are, and also creating those new automations for the future.
Wow, that is super interesting. And sentiment analysis on an employee's document. So as an organization, if you're something huge, I don't know, Microsoft or someplace like that, you could monitor and say, oh, the employees are getting restless, right? Like we need to do something for morale.
Yeah, there's some potential for that too, but I think probably a more familiar use case might be if you've got some sort of a user support type of library where you have a lot of documents in that user support library, and a user has some question that is really kind of odd, then that bot could look through all the different documents that they have and sort of generate a unique answer to that person's unique situation, and maybe alleviate some of that time from a human having to go through and troubleshoot that.
Oh, yeah. I run into that all the time where someone asks a question that might be a little obscure. And I'm like, I know I've answered this for someone before, but I guess I'll just reinvent the whole thing. So that would be really nice. So they're working on, or at least they started working on these printer driver situations. Our tech people here do a great job, but why are printers so bad?
Printing technology, it's, well, for one, it's really old. It's very old, and it's, for whatever reason, it's just really, really complicated. It's very hard to innovate in the printer technology, the printer space. And so Vasion really started to grow. They originally called Printer Logic, and their whole scheme was eliminate your print server. So taking the management of those printers, taking it from an on-premise sort of in the machine type of a solution to now being a cloud-based internet solution, so that an IT professional could manage that a lot easier.
Okay, makes a lot of sense. Well, good. And so kind of in the product management world, I know online you've posted a little bit about design thinking and jobs to be done theories. I wouldn't just spend a lot of time on this. I think I halfway understand those concepts, but just as examples of the way someone in your role thinks, what do those things mean?
Yeah, so jobs to be done theory is one that I really subscribe to, and there's a lot of different sources for this, and I kind of like to Clay Christensen and some of his like Innovator's Dilemma type stuff. And there's an old article where Clay was working with a company. He doesn't actually specify what it is in the article, but I think it was leaked later that it was like McDonald's or something.
Gotta be.
Where they were looking at how to increase milkshake sales. Mm-hmm. And so they did all of this user testing, all of this stuff, and milkshake sales were just flat. They were just flatlined. But then they actually sat down in the restaurant and they noticed who's buying milkshakes when. And they noticed that there were two different types of milkshake purchasers. One was in the morning, they were commuters, and they flagged these people down after they bought their milkshake and they said, "Why did you buy that milkshake? What did you hire that milkshake to do for you?" And these commuters were like, "Oh, I have a long commute. I get kind of bored. Maybe I'm a little bit sleepy, and I want something just kind of to keep me awake, maybe a little bit interesting. I don't want coffee or anything like that, but just a little milkshake to keep it interesting, right?" And so when you have a milkshake like that, well, maybe you want to put some little chunks in there of, cookie dough or fruit or something, and much bigger straw so that you can, and you want to make sure that that cup is safe for commuters and such. But then later on in the day, they found a second type of a buyer, which was a dad with kids. He's coming into McDonald's. He's been telling his kids no all day. No, you can't have this. No, you can't do that. No, you can't watch TV. And then all of a sudden he takes his kid to McDonald's and he has the chance to be the hero and he can say, "Yes, you can get a milkshake," right? So he buys milkshakes for his kids. But with the kids, they don't want something interesting. Eventually he's going to get a little bit impatient. He's like, "Just finish your milkshake. We got to go." So that milkshake is going to be a little bit different. Maybe you have a little bit different straw, different flavors, different buying behaviors there. Right. And so the whole idea is, what job are you hiring that product to do for you? You have some sort of problem in your life, or rather, I would say you have some desired progress that you're trying to make in a given set of circumstances. And you're going to go out and hire a solution for that job or for that problem. And the whole idea of jobs theory is making sure that you actually know what your users, what your buyers, what your purchasers, what they are actually trying to do when they turn to your product or solution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so when we have technologists coming out of a lab here, we don't know. We don't know what the product's going to be or what the consumers want. So we're working more on customer validation, having interns contact potential buyers and try to answer this very question. But in the case of Bayesian, the product you work on, I assume the problem is you're a tech person in a large organization and you're losing your mind because you have to track all these devices. So make it simple for me, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very complex process. And even as we start to expand more into automation, some of the problems with traditional automation are you need highly technical people who can build these really rigid automations. And as soon as your business changes or the market changes, then your automations break. And then you have to pay really expensive developers who are very talented to go rebuild your automations for you. And so we're trying to tackle that problem and say, how do we make automation as easy and simple as possible for the citizen, non-technical automator to go out and build these automations?
Yeah, and for an entrepreneur, if you look around and you see people doing these expensive custom solutions for the same problem over and over, obviously an opportunity. So your company pursues that one. That's great. So on your prior podcast, which was Pathing to Product, you were talking about product management. What were some of the things you learned from that, or what were key themes that you thought were important for that audience?
Yeah, that podcast started because, I was an English major and I had a lot of BYU MBA business students reaching out to me saying, "How do I get your job?"
Oh, yeah.
And I thought, why are you asking me? I should be asking you, how do I get an MBA? And my buddy and I, we just had so many of these guys reaching out to us. We thought, okay, let's try to put a podcast together. Let's see what job people are hiring us to do for them, right? And so the idea of that podcast was, let's just interview common actual professionals who are in the field. Maybe they're 3 months or 6 months into the field. Maybe they're 20 years into the field. And we're just going to ask them to tell their story about how they became product managers. And one of the really interesting things that I found, one of the common themes amongst all of those people that we interviewed was so many different backgrounds, so many different skill sets. But I think there were at least two things that were common amongst nearly all of the 20 plus interviews that we did. One was an insatiable curiosity about the world around them. These people who were professional product managers, they asked questions. They asked so many questions, and they weren't satisfied with surface level answers. They would just keep asking and just keep asking. And they were like, this thing occurred to me, and I was just like, I'm going to go research that, and I'm going to go dig into that as much as I can. I remember one guy who He's like, yeah, I saw my dad's like weed eater in the garage, and I wondered, how does that work? So I grabbed a screwdriver and I took it apart, and he just takes these things apart. I was like, hey, I used to do that too when I was a kid. I used to take mechanical things apart as a kid. So this curiosity and a willingness to say, okay, this is how a thing is, but can I break that down into its component parts and understand that more? Which leads to the second major thing that I saw was skill sets of a product manager can be learned. They can be trained, they can be improved, and that's fine. They're coachable. But what I've noticed was really not so much coachable was, I'd say, I call it sort of the product manager mindset, which was, okay, this is how things exist today, but what are the problems with how things exist today, and how might we improve that or change that for the future? And what makes that really interesting, I think what separates product managers, I think, from the rest of the population is product managers have a unique ability to say, okay, here is such and such problem that exists today, but we're going to generate ideas and solutions that have never existed before. And we're going to test those out, and we are going to very quickly figure out which ones work and which ones don't. But they have just this uncanny ability to recognize current situations and problems, and then to imagine totally brand new things, innovative things, and then bring those to actual fruition, bring those to life.
So if you go to a meeting like a professional conference and it's product managers, you look around and say, oh yeah, this is my people. Is there some kind of common personality going on?
I do. Yeah, I do. I certainly feel that way. And a lot of it is just a lot of optimism about, yeah, we recognize there's a lot of problems and things like that, but we can solve problems. We know how to solve problems, and just a lot of curiosity. And you definitely do have a sense of camaraderie in a conference like that.
Yeah, I do think professionally you kind of gravitate to the position that is people like you somehow, or at least most of us do. It's a happy place to be. So you also, though, have to collaborate with other people. You talked about the technical people you work with, other groups in a company. Do you have Dilbert-like situations where there are awkward interfaces, or do you how does that work?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, anytime you're dealing with humans, you're going to have awkward conversations all the time. But the key of a product manager is you are most often, I'd say, like the connector of dots. You're a facilitator of conversations. One of the highlights of my career was I got 4 different experts in a room. I had a UX designer, I had like an academic level researcher, I had an expert email marketer, and I can't remember what the 4th one was, but there was a totally different discipline. And I was able to say, all right, everybody, here is the problem that our users are experiencing. Here's why it's important for our business. Here are some parameters or guardrails for a solution that we need to come up with. Go. Like, let's start this conversation. And I took, and they just rolled with it. And they were collaborating, going back and forth. And I would say, oh, no, that particular idea is out of scope for right now. We can't do that for these reasons, but let's continue something like, and I was able just to facilitate that conversation. And between the 4 of them, we came up with something totally amazing that are a lot of different ideas that were amazing that I could not have done individually on my own by myself.
Yeah, and when you're dealing with different types of people and different roles, there's a difference in language that you use. You have to translate terms. That's not too hard, really. But mindsets you mentioned, you mentioned product managers are more forward-looking. They're thinking about the future, and that's not everyone. Some people are very present-focused. Some people are looking at traditional things, looking back. How do you get people to join you and kind of look forward a bit?
Yeah, sometimes it really is just a focus on the customer and the problem that they're experiencing. What I've really found as a product manager, if I can do a number of customer interviews and then I splice those, I take the highlights of those and splice that into like a 4 or 5 minute clip or something, and I can say, look, this is what people who are using our software, our product, this is what they are actually experiencing right now. And when you see people like struggling through something, or they're rage clicking through something, or they're expressing a problem and how like big of a problem that is, when you see that one right after another, boom, 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 then it really starts to trigger a lot of empathy within the people that are around you. And then you can start to say, okay, great. You have a certain skill set and perspective. How might you approach making this a better experience? Right. And sometimes it works better with other people than it does with others, but it really is incumbent upon the product manager to really try to lead out that conversation and bring out that collaboration and just kind of lead it out of folks. That's not a really good term, but I think you see what I'm saying.
No, that's really just bringing letting them see what's actually going wrong, get that emotional, like, present response on that. So if people are being frustrated with something, I can't think which app it is, maybe a baking app or something that I use. It always pops up this window at the wrong time. It makes me like insane with rage every time I use it. I'm like, how have they not noticed this? But that's a hard thing to notice. How do you find out if consumers are having a problem like that?
There's a lot of different ways that you can do that. One of it is looking at usage analytics. Maybe you see a drop in clicks of a certain area. Another one you can use, it's called session tracking software, where you can actually see where users' mouse is navigating, what they're trying to click on. Yeah. And you can see things like a rage click, where they're like clicking 10 times in one little spot. Yeah. Or you can also see where they're trying to click places where they're not. Another thing to do is to take your software or your designs and actually sit and do what's called like a usability test with another person who's not familiar with your product, and you just sit them down and say, here is your home screen. Here's a task that we would like you to do. How would you do that? And then you shut up, right? You just close your mouth, you sit back, you don't answer their questions, you just let them struggle through and say, speak out loud about how you're doing this. And also a lot of times too, you got to listen to the other cross disciplines across the whole entire business. Sales is going to be telling you what customers' problems are. Customer success is going to be telling you what customers' problems are. The executive team, they're going to be having unique conversations as well. And so really it is that art and balance and science of a product manager to be listening across all these different perspectives, plus doing your own work, plus utilizing whatever data gathering tools that you can to really try to hone in and see, okay, what are the customer problems in our current experience?
Oh, super interesting. So in the kind of inventor and tech licensing space, which Tech Transfer is a part of, a lot of people will say, if you have a new technology and you're trying to introduce it to a company, you should reach out to the product managers. They're the people who will be interested. Is that really the case? It seems like you'd be working mostly on your own products. How often are you looking for or open to some new thing?
That is a really interesting assumption. And I don't know if I have necessarily any data to say that that's true or not. I do, as a product manager, I do receive a lot of solicitation emails for new things. And I usually just ignore them. I really do. Yeah. And number one, because I'm not the purchaser, I'm not the decision maker on that particular thing. And number two, it's like, if I have a problem or if I need a tool, like I mentioned user tracking tools before, right? Some great tools are Hotjar and Full Story like that. Yeah, and if I recognize, as a product manager, I'm pretty adept at recognizing the problems that I'm experiencing as a user, right? Like, that's kind of my mindset. And I feel like, hey, I really need to know what's going on with our users. I need a user tracking tool. I'm going to go out and do my own research and kind of find that and do that. So I'm going to probably be more open to, let me go out and find a tool and evaluate different tools rather than cold emails coming into me. I will also say too, it's like, there's a principle that you learn as a storyteller, coming back to my English major, which is show, don't tell, right? And so many, like almost 100% of these cold emails are just telling you like, hey, we have this cool product and it will do this thing for you and it has these features. Like, great, you're telling me that. Yeah. But why don't you take my product or something about my company, run it through your engine or whatever it is, and come up with a thing? Like, for example, right now I actually have a side hustle where we're helping podcasters create AI generated content for their social media feeds, right? And one of the things that we're doing here on the side is I can take a podcast RSS feed, put it into our AI engine, generate those images for a podcaster, and then I can put those in the email and I can say, hey, look, I did this for you. These are your images. You're free to use them as much as you'd want. If you're open to to another conversation or exploring this a little bit further, email me back and let's start a conversation. Right. So it's more of a principle of, I'm trying to show you the value. I'm giving you free value. Here's images already that my product created for you, rather than just telling you, hey, I can solve this problem for you. Those emails will go ignored all day long.
Oh, great. And you've talked about in some of your other content, the importance of storytelling in business. So that's an example, like show them a story with an actual result. Where else do you see that? Where is story important?
Story is incredibly important, especially for product managers, when you are trying to evangelize whatever work your team is working on right then. And it's in particular with the executive team or whoever, like the ultimate decision makers are within the business of what actually gets built. The more persuasive that a product manager can be with the stories they tell, the more successful they will be. And so like a great example of this is I once heard of a product manager who was going toe-to-toe with the CEO. CEO says, we need to build X. Product manager says, no, we need to build Y. And CEO says, well, I'm the boss. We're going to build X. Mm-hmm. Product manager goes back and did exactly what I described before. Gets a handful of user interviews, clips them all together, makes a very persuasive story out of that, goes back to the CEO and says, here's why I think we should do Y. Here's this whole clip of user stories. The CEO just looks at that and basically says, you know what, you're right. We don't need to do X, we need to do Y, right? And so storytelling and persuasive storytelling with data, with user clips, the voice of the user, the strategic business outcomes that you're trying to get to, all of those things are incredibly important as a product manager.
Okay, so a lot of what you mentioned is you're providing someone with data to be persuasive, but story is a step further. How do you get from data to story?
Yeah, absolutely. So data, like one data point, okay, fine, cool, great. 2 data points, okay, maybe we have a pattern here. But if you can show 3 or 4 or 5 data points that are all different perspectives of a problem, then you start to have a really compelling story. For example, I used to work at OC Tanner, which was an employee recognition company.
Sure.
And I was on the team that we were tasked with helping humans initiate their own recognition, right? And so I was able to say, we were able to say, okay, here is our goal outcome that we're going for. We're trying to increase the amount of people giving recognition and the frequency in which they're doing that. Well, what are they doing that today? And so I was able to look at our current data point, and we came up with the rate, and we, XYZ percentage of people are actually giving recognition in these ways, right? So that's a quantitative data point. But then I can go to and do a handful of users, and I can go talk to folks on, hey, you started the giving recognition flow, but you didn't end it. Tell me why. What was going on in your heart, mind, and et cetera there?
Yeah.
And then I can go to other people and I can say, okay, you started the giving recognition flow and you ended it and you gave it out. Tell me why. What were you hoping to do there? What progress were you trying to make in that given set of circumstances, right? And I can start to see, now I have all these qualitative stories that I can tell. I can tie that up with the quantitative data that I was seeing as well. And now I have a whole really compelling story from both qualitative and quantitative side of things to really persuade the executive team, hey, maybe we need to pay a little bit more attention here, or hey, this solution is actually going to work, or this is the actual problem that we should be solving.
Okay, fantastic. Well, good. Well, we're just about out of time here, but Aaron, if people want to learn more about any of this or follow your podcast, where can they find you online?
Yeah, so head me up on LinkedIn, Aaron Airmet, that's AIRMET. If you're interested in Lord of the Rings and you want to listen to a podcast about that, head over to ringspodcast.com. And if you are a current podcaster and you want to look at AI-generated images for social media, then head to PodCrew.ai and you'll see what we've got going on there. But all of that is to say, just hit me up on LinkedIn, Aaron Airmet, AIRMET, and I can direct you where you need to go.
Okay, final question, I promise. But I'm really interested in your side hustle. So with PodCrew, you're creating images for podcasts, but are you creating actual voice content and other things? What's the range of what you do there?
Not yet. So we're still like in alpha prototype stage. The initial problem that we're trying to solve is podcast discoverability. So I was complaining to a developer friend of mine of like, hey, you know what? It's really hard for new people to find my podcast. I have all the social media stuff going, and I was like, look, I take my podcast, I put it in ChatGPT, it pulls out these interesting tidbits. I take those tidbits, I create a prompt, and I create a social media image for that. Then I take that image and I go back to ChatGPT and I say, create a social media post for me. And he was like, dude, we could automate that for you. And he builds out this whole prototype of, okay, now you just have this, you just put in your RSS feed, you select which episode you want. Within a few minutes, you have a handful of generated images plus text that you could put into a social media post. And we've got a lot of different ideas for what we could do in the future, but we're all just really trying to help AI. We're trying to help podcasters and other content creators harness the power of AI without having any technical skills, just to get their message out further.
Fantastic. I hope that goes really well for you. I use ChatGPT and other tools like crazy on the podcast, but it is very time intensive. So,
yep.
Great. Well, this has been fascinating. Thanks for taking the time, Aaron. Really appreciate your insights.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for inviting me, David.